You cannot simply say that Islam always has a negative force on democracy and that the Arab Spring was certainly a positive thing happening in the region. And that question, what the role of Islam in the Arab Spring is, or what the role of these forces have on democratization processes in the Middle East, that is one of the questions I want to look into. And I want to disentangle that complexity, because saying or thinking that something is complex is only the starting point of thinking as a social scientist. I want to understand what these people that we're talking about think, what they want. And I want to know that for the Middle East. A lot of people in the Middle East say that they actually want democracy. But again, let's ask the people in the Middle East themselves. If we look at this graph, basically, if all the countries were found here, then the people in those countries would have chosen comments that say democracy to me means that people are politically equal. If all the countries were to be found here, then the people say democracy to me means that there's economic equality, that there's more economic equality than there is now. And what do we see? Actually, all the countries are within this range. So, more or less in the middle. So, I would still say these people want democracy. But to have a democracy is something else than wanting a democracy. But then, we had the Arab Spring. Thousands or even millions of people taking the streets with the risk that they were actually killed or harmed in one way or another, and asking for changes, for economic and political changes. So we're talking about the Arab Uprisings as a regional phenomenon, but we should also think about what the differences are between what happened in different countries. We know by now that the institutional results of the Arab Spring were not that positive. There's only one country with a democracy. But still, we might expect or argue that it awakens a kind of democratic feel among the people. In many countries, not much happened. The desire for having a democratic system didn't change that much. In some countries, we did see a change after the Arab Uprisings. But what happened, in each of the countries where we see a change, we actually see that the desire for democracy dropped. In some countries, there was hope, because there was major protest, and there were some initial reforms in those countries. Think about the democratization processes in Egypt, in Tunisia, but also reforms in Jordan, in Bahrain. Several of these countries tried to politically reform some of the institutions. And in each of those countries, the support for democracy, the desire to have a democratic system, actually dropped a few years after the Arab Spring. So what seems to be happening here is that people in the end did get disappointed by the actual having of more democracy. What has Islam got to do with this? There's actually one aspect only of democracy, of Islamic religiosity that shows some kind of relationship with the desire for democracy in the MENA region. And that is political Islamism. Basically, do people think that religion demarcates or determines what politics can decide about? So, is religion hierarchical more important than the political decision-making process? And that relates to the support for democracy. So what we see is that, again, democracy is also seen as a system that is instrumental to changing your life for the better or for your particular group. It can be about economic change, but also about religious change. The religious group you belong to would benefit from a democratic system if currently that particular religious group is suppressed by the regime. So these were some nuances, let's say, on how the Arab Spring did not deliver. It did not awaken that feeling of we want more democracy. I would add to that, Islam did not deliver. Islam is not that singular negative force withholding democracy from taking off in the Middle East.